Okay, hello everyone. Students who are here willingly and students who are here willingly bribed. And also faculty. We have not been bribed. We are here voluntarily. So, I believe that if not all of you, most of you know John already. Some of you may have even taken his IDS class at the end of the fall semester. So John today is going to be telling us about a very interesting topic, especially if you're thinking about transferring to Missouri for year 3 and 4. John is going to be telling us about what it is like to live in a different country. Now, this is something that for some of you may be a bit strange. You were born in China, you have been living in China your whole lives. You don't know what it is like to live in a different place. But this is an experience that most of your teachers have to live with every day. So if nothing else, this talk will help you understand your teachers a bit better and will help you think about what your life may be like if and when you move to the US. Okay? So now, John.
Yeah, thank you very much, Javier, for that great introduction. Yeah, actually, this topic was the first one I thought of when I first, back 3 years ago, when you were looking for ideas, and I said, immigration. But I didn't know how to approach it. Until suddenly my brother suggested an idea to me. He came to visit me last summer in South Korea, and he was in the airport. He said to me at one point, John, I think I've seen all I need to see of Korea. And I said, you're in the airport. He said, oh, that's right. An airport's a very liminal space. I said, yeah. And so that sort of led me to realize, well, gosh, maybe liminal is really a condition that we can talk about to understand immigration and what it's like to live overseas, outside your own country. And as he said, and as I pointed out, most of your teachers here, your foreign teachers, are actually living in a liminal existence. We're never here nor there. We cannot belong anywhere. And so this is what we're going to talk about tonight. Now, before I can begin exploring the conditions of those who live outside their countries of birth, I need to introduce this term, liminality. And it is actually a concept that we experience to some extent every single day because it's a multidisciplinary term used in architecture, anthropology, sociology, psychology, philosophy, theology, literature, and film. They all use it. And it refers to being between two or more spaces or conditions, but entering neither space fully. Or it's a period of transition between two conditions. With that transition, there is a suspension of normal activity and a great deal of uncertainty or ambiguity about where you are and what you are. Hallways are liminal spaces, believe it or not. So every time you're in that hallway, you are in a liminal space. You're neither where you need to be nor where you came from. You're just going somewhere. That's it. Well, we do sit down in the hallway sometimes, but it's just for a few minutes, and it's not very comfortable, is it? Perhaps more liminal are stairways. I saw a student sitting on the stairways eating lunch yesterday, and I thought, that student is liminal. Perhaps even more liminal are lobbies, like this lobby right outside. This is where we spend the least amount of time. We just come in, up the stairs, and straight to class. Very liminal. But on a larger scale, streets and all roads are liminal. Again, you're just passing through, hopefully as quickly as you can, and you don't get stuck in traffic. Hotel rooms are among the most liminal spaces of all. If you're staying in a hotel room, you're going to be somewhere later, you're probably just passing through quickly. Or maybe you're doing something that you wouldn't be able to do at home. Buses and subways are liminal, very liminal. And by the way, you're roaring through the darkness in a subway usually, right? Very liminal. Train stations like the Dalian North Railway, and even more so, airports are even more liminal. One scholar has noted that airplanes are the most liminal spaces of all, and I thought this was an interesting idea, so I highlighted. Alexandra Murphy wrote, an essay way back in the 1990s, The Organizational Politics of Place and Space, the Perpetual Liminoid Performance of Commercial Flight. Murphy asserts that while we are in the air, we are engaging in a set of cultural performances, very scripted and rehearsed, aimed at convincing us that air travel is a reflection of reality rather than a separation from it. This is why a 9 or 10-hour flight is so tedious. You are following a very strict regime, and you're completely removed from what's going on the earth. No other normal activity in modern human life is as suspending and uncertain as air travel. But back on the ground, and speaking of cultural performances, the concept of liminality originated with German-French anthropologist Arnold van Gennep. It's a Dutch name. It's a very liminal fellow. German, French, mother was Dutch. It was in the old German Empire when it was kind of in flux itself as a country. In his book, Les Rites de Passage, in 1908, van Gennep presented the ceremonies, public assemblies, weddings, funerals, and other rituals of transition as liminal. Thus, our freshman welcoming ceremony and the upcoming commencement ceremony are liminal activities. This is my wife's graduation, by the way, a few years ago. As are sporting events and musical concerts, where we collectively seal ourselves inside public arenas and suspend our involvement with the rest of the world. You go to a rock concert, you're removed from what's happening for 3 hours. You go to a sporting event, you're removed for 3 or 4 hours. The definition and application of liminality, though, have expanded greatly since van Gennep's first proposal. In 1969, British anthropologist Victor Turner, working directly from van Gennep's framework for ritual as liminal experience, introduced the concept of liminal personae, people living permanently in a liminal state. Liminal personae are not embedded anywhere, neither here nor there. They are betwixt and between the positions assigned and arrayed by law, custom, convention, and ceremony. He goes on. In his studies of tribal ritual in Namibia, he saw that liminal personae were being portrayed in tribal ceremonies. They were a part of the literature of that society. They are, as liminal beings, he said, they have no status, property, insignia, secular clothing indicating rank or role, or position in a kinship system. This is our condition, I think, in China. More, the anthology Neither Here Nor There, which took its title from Turner, Many Voices of Liminality. I know this is probably pretty small for you, but this is a list of possible liminal situations, a passage through crisis. Remember COVID-19? How liminal was that? We didn't know where we were. Most of us could not go anywhere. I lived in the Philippines under lockdown there, couldn't go. War, natural disaster, cross-cultural adoption or adaptation, climate change, which we're entering, critical illness, prison, how liminal, how separate from everything else is that? Social collapse and reconstruction, being a member of any minority group, genocide, studying abroad, there's a chapter in the book on it, and other forms of migration and immigration. Which brings us to our topic. Migration and immigration as a liminal experience. Our focus today, I want you to ask some questions as you're listening to this. How are we, the faculty of this college, and Javier already acknowledged, living liminally? And how might our students be living or working liminally as well? You, our students. This is why I wanted you to come here. Are you actually in a liminal condition? And what's that really like? Well, let's start with the students. Why liminality is relevant to our students. When you enter a classroom, you are straddling at least 2 identities and 2 systems, but firmly in neither. Maybe more firmly in one than the other, I'm not sure. You remain among your Chinese classmates, but you are in a fully Western educational context. Your teacher is thinking in Western ways, not Chinese, and employing Western approaches, and in English, which you are required to follow. The challenge of this liminoid condition may make you want to hide, retreat, or return to your Chinese identity. In every single class, some students do. But refusal to immerse yourself or adapt to the Western approach may lead to failure in the course. Now, I'm not saying this is good. I'm thinking it's actually pretty dangerous to you. But welcome to the liminal world. If that's how you feel, you are in a liminal world. All right, well, as Javier pointed out, I taught an IDS course in January. Some of you may have been there. And during that course, I decided I wanted to explore, how does film explore migrant and immigrant experiences? So I chose to present 12 films on the migrant and immigrant experience. 3 of these films emerged as highlights, and I'm going to show you some excerpts from them now. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. This is a kind of a science fiction absurdist comedy. It's difficult to watch, but it's also based on, it tells the story of Chinese immigrants to the U.S. and their liminality. And it poses liminality very metaphorically and symbolically or allegorically, not very literal. El Norte, from 1983, this is a film about Guatemalan refugees who were trying to escape Guatemala, where the landowners who wanted to take the peasant land were killing the peasants. They wanted to escape to the United States, and how liminal that became. Very clear on the liminal experience. And The Terminal, probably the one everybody knows the best, Tom Hanks. This is based on an actual Iranian migrant. He was a refugee from Iran, and when he landed in Paris, he realized he had lost his refugee papers. Well, this is a rewrite of that story. It's a Southeast European tourist from an imaginary country who lands in New York to visit a jazz club, and he discovers when he lands that his government has been overthrown in a coup, and he is stateless. Statelessness is probably the greatest liminality. So, it occurred to me, as we were watching these, that all the migrants and immigrants portrayed in these films shared one condition in common. They were living liminally. Some, and I'm going to show you some film clips now, some were unable to stay in the countries of their birth. The first one comes from El Norte.
Tu vida ahorita no vale ni 5 centavos. Regresarán por vos. Hoy, mañana, pasado. Te van a buscar y te van a encontrar. Vos no podés huirle. Son babosadas.
Sí puedo. Me voy para el norte.
Which he does with his sister, only to find out that it's no easier. Yet they were struggling to adapt in the countries where they were trying to live. This is from Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Sounds to me like a teacher talking to a student. Watch this.
Mrs. Wang, are you with us?
Yes? Of course, I'm here, just thinking.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just hoping that you could explain this.
This is a receipt. My receipt. 我们在说什么？
Yeah, and they seem to be moving back and forth between several identities in multiple spaces. This is a crazy scene. It's not literal in the least. It's just a montage that tries to express the chaos of living so liminally between identities and purposes. Right there at the end, she's being arrested by a white police officer from her laundromat. They were moving through liminal spaces, in public hallways.
Is it that I can't be here? Or that I'm not allowed to be here?
哎，礼貌点啊！
Hands
See, I can physically be here. But what you meant to say is you're not allowing me to be here.
This, that line right there kind of sums up one of our great anxieties. We don't really belong. We're here, we can be here to some extent, but we're not allowed really to do much or go further. And in elevators.
我
在想，等我们这个事情都结束了，我们要不要一起去旅行，还是什么？
If I have to think of one more thing today, my head will explode. Come on.
You may be in grave danger. There's no time to explain. Hold this.
In airports, this is from the terminal. Some had to remain trapped. And again, this sounds very much like an experience some of us may have had with immigration. I know I have.
So all the flights in and out of your country have been suspended indefinitely. And the new government has sealed all the borders, which means that your passport and visa are no longer valid. So currently, you are a citizen of nowhere. Yeah, see, you don't qualify for asylum, refugee status, temporary protective status, humanitarian parole, or non-immigration work, travel, or diplomatic visas. You don't qualify for any of these things. You are, at this time, simply unacceptable.
They also travel through rat-infested tunnels, horrible risk to life and health, and great risk. Watch this one. This is from El Norte. They had to cobble together whatever was around them. We all do this, trying to form a new lifestyle in the environment we're in, where your normal or previous lifestyles would not be possible. From the terminal. Floated among two or more statuses, never settling in one status or the other, because doing so became impossible. This is the closing, one of the closing scenes to El Norte.
En nuestra tierra no hay lugar para nosotros. Nos quieren matar. No hay lugar ahí para nosotros. En México solo hay pobreza. Tampoco hay lugar ahí para nosotros. Y aquí, en el norte, no somos aceptados, pues. ¿Cuándo vamos a encontrar un lugar, Enrique?
Very sad, that one, huh? Yeah, well, they were living liminally. That condition of dwelling in a membrane among multiple statuses or conditions, but never settling in one, is called liminality. Let's talk a little bit about the types of people who we regard as living overseas. or outside their countries of birth. The terms for those, the rest of the presentation, I'm going to present these terms and talk about them. And they can be quite controversial. The terms for those who live and work outside their countries are often controversial, shaped by politics, economics, economic class, and even race. These terms range widely in usage, and they include refugee, migrant, immigrant, expatriate. Do you know the differences among them? Let's see if we can sort it out. Within these categories, there are subcategories and more precise definitions to describe the economic and political status of the people and their purposes in living outside their own countries. Refugees may include stateless people, although the UN says that most stateless people are actually living within the country they were born, but many of them do try to become refugees. We had a big crisis just a few years ago in Myanmar. The Rohingya people were deprived of their citizenship simply for their ethnic group, and they fled to Bangladesh. Bangladesh could not take them. Too poor. Migrants. Most are migrants. And I believe most of our teachers here are migrants too. I don't know if you agree or not, teachers, but believe it or not, you probably are. Immigrants, we'll talk about those, and expatriates. Now, expatriates, by the way, if you study overseas for just a limited amount of time and you intend to return to your country, you are an expatriate. Let's go through them one by one. Refugee. Now, here we have a staff member of the UNHCR, UN High Commission for Refugees, trying to help a family, probably from somewhere in the Near East, landing on Lesbos Island in Greece. The UN High Commission for Refugees says that refugees are people who have fled their countries to escape conflict, violence, or persecution, and have sought safety in another country. This definition does not include those seeking to escape economic difficulty. That's another category, not included under refugee. Now, the UN High Commission for Refugees says that there were 42.5 million refugees globally just less than a year ago. They're keeping very close tabs on it because it's growing. Then we have migrant. Okay, the Institute of Migration Studies, which is an agency of the UN, defines a migrant, I don't know if you can read it, it's too small. A migrant is any person who is moving or has moved across an international border or within a state away from his or her habitual place of residence, regardless of the person's legal status, whether the movement is voluntary or involuntary, what the causes for the movement are, or what the link to the state is. But it's tricky because it just becomes cloudy at this point. Well, how many migrants are there in the world? This is going to surprise you. The migrants are increasing. According to UNDESA, which is UN's global census data, these are the ones who count how many people, the 8 billion who live on Earth now. In 2024, the global number of international migrants was 304 million. That's almost the size of the United States itself. It's the size of Western Europe. Nearly double the number in 1994, when there were an estimated 154 million international migrants worldwide. I mean, the number has doubled since I first came to Asia. It's amazing to me. Thus, international migrants comprise 3.7% of the global population. Well, the UN distinguishes very clearly, though, between refugees and migrants, though it does acknowledge some overlap. There are important differences between the terms migrant and refugee. This is a quote from the website of the UN High Commission for Refugees on this issue. Again, there are important differences between the terms migrant and refugee which cannot be used interchangeably. Refugees are outside their own country because of a threat to their lives or freedom. They are defined and protected by a specific international legal framework. The term migrant, on the other hand, is not defined under international law and is sometimes used differently by different stakeholders. Traditionally, the word migrant has been used to designate people who move by choice rather than to escape conflict or persecution, usually across an international border. The UNHCR points out the cause of this ambiguity, the confusion between refugee or migrant, or the tendency to lump refugees in with migrants. Migrant is increasingly used as an umbrella term to refer to any person who moves away from their usual place of residence, whether internally or across a border, and regardless of whether the movement is forced or voluntary. To resolve this ambiguity, UNHCR recommends the following way of thinking: that people who are likely to be asylum seekers or refugees are referred to as such, and that the word migrant should not be used as a catch-all term to refer to refugees or to people who are likely to need international protection. Doing so can risk undermining access to the specific legal protections that states are obliged to provide to refugees. However, this distinction does not diminish the importance of migrants, I don't think. UNHCR supports rights-based approaches to all people on the move, both because all people are entitled to protection of their human rights and because improved protection for migrants will have a positive effect on the refugees. And UNHCR acknowledges the overlap. Refugees and migrants often employ, this may be also a cause of why we confuse them, refugees and migrants often employ the same routes and modes of transport and networks and end up seeking the same kinds of employment. Cross-border movements involving both refugees and migrants are referred to as mixed movements. I have experienced mixed movements. I have been in a mixed movement. As an ESL instructor in California, I taught an asylum seeker from Colombia, an older Argentinian man who wanted to immigrate to the US. I taught Japanese surfers who were just taking English classes so they could stay in America for a while and then go back home. Your teachers are migrants, though many might not like to call themselves so. Most of your teachers in this program are economic migrant workers. Some might even consider themselves to be economic refugees, which, as I've just pointed out, is a debatable term. This is an actual poster by a Mexican migrant advocacy group that I came across, where they are trying to push for the recognition of the term economic refugees. Let's talk about immigrants. Here I have a lovely picture. I thought a picture of some Canadian immigrants would be, Canada's a very refreshing country these days compared to others, so I included this one. To quote one of many governments accepting immigrants, Statistics Canada defines an immigrant as this: a person who is or who has ever been a landed immigrant or permanent resident. Landed immigrant or permanent resident. That means not a citizen. Such a person has been granted the right to live in Canada permanently by immigration authorities. Immigrants who have obtained Canadian citizenship by naturalization are included in this group as well. Now, many migrants do sooner or later become immigrants. This may be a question of type of visa or other documentation of status more than anything. Quite simply, you've got a visa that is only applicable to a migrant. Later, you get one that's only applicable to an immigrant. For example, again, most of your foreign teachers here are not immigrants. And even some who could be have chosen not to be as well. They are in China on employment visas, tied to a particular job, and once that job is finished, we must leave the country or find another job, and we probably have to leave the country to do that. Most cannot receive permanent residence. Becoming a permanent resident. It is difficult in most Asian countries. This is not an immigrant or, they're not interested in immigrants. Why? Most Asian countries are ethno-states. I probably should have made a slide on this one. Ethno-states. Countries in Asia are developed around a specific ethnic group. If you're not from that ethnic group, you'll never really be recognized as a full member of society. They'll welcome you for certain purposes, but you cannot really join the society. Now, ironically, even though South Korea is one of the most ethno-state countries in the world, it has, legally, one of the more open paths to permanent residence. All you have to do is remain in the country for a certain amount of time, test at a certain level of Korean proficiency, show a certain amount of funds that you will have available as you seek your own employment. Not even permanently, just until you find a reasonable amount to find a job on your own. Receive character recommendations from Korean friends, employers, and family. It's pretty much all you have to do. Now, it is similar, but much stricter in China. And I wanted to highlight this. Maybe you'll become aware of the difference. Eligibility requirements include: the applicant has made direct and stable investments in China with good tax payment records for 3 consecutive years. This is the big one, a lot of groups in this. The applicant holds the position of Deputy General Manager, Faculty Deputy Director or above. These would be people contributing to the industrial development of China. Those with professional, associate, senior titles or above, such as associate professor or associate researcher, or has been enjoying the equivalent salary in China for at least 4 consecutive years and residing in China for a total of not less than 3 years, within 4 years, with good tax records. Now I'm interested in this number 3. This one right here, as you can see, that one. I'm interested in this because I wonder, how easy a path is that? Those with professional, associate, senior titles or above, such as associate professor, Javier is one, or associate researcher. This condition may be the most relevant to members of our faculty. But I've asked Javier, can I quote you here? You've said it's very complicated even so. Yes? All right. Now, the applicant has made significant and outstanding contributions to China and is especially needed in the country. They're looking for stars, people winning Nobel Prizes. The applicant is the spouse of a Chinese citizen or of a foreign national who has obtained permanent residence status in China. Married for a minimum of 5 years, 5 consecutive years of residence in China with no less than 9 months each year, and a stable source of income and domicile. This number 5, I'm interested in that one. There's one particular phrase there, the spouse of a Chinese citizen. Now, this is the most obvious, quickest path to permanent residence in most Asian countries. If you marry someone, a citizen of an ethno-state, they'll let you come in about halfway. Yeah? A migrant in some countries, an immigrant in others. I am a migrant in South Korea and a migrant here in China. I am an immigrant in the Philippines. The decision to become a permanent resident of any country is a tough one. By becoming permanent residents, and thus immigrants, migrants may be subject to laws and requirements that they were free from, such as taxation and maintenance of domicile. On the other hand, unlike migrants, permanent residents are not present in a country due solely to employment, and they are freer to seek employment as they wish, including multiple jobs. All of us teachers here, we are required under law only to have this job. There is no permission outside. South Korea is slightly more lenient on that. You can get permission from the employer to do that, and I have. When I was in South Korea, I managed to work 2 jobs because I could prove that the wages from one were not substantial enough. Thus, though I have lived in Korea for nearly 30 years and I would have qualified for permanent residence, I did not see any need to do so. I never married a Korean. Instead, I married a Filipina. And so I knew I was going to be heading out of that country eventually. No point in trying to get permanent residence. My migrant status was sufficient for my income. I remained a migrant, and eventually I moved to other countries. Now, in the Philippines, I easily obtained permanent residence through marriage. In the Philippines, using the Canadian definition, I am an immigrant aiming to settle there permanently. Now, perhaps the most controversial, debatable, class-dependent term of all is the expatriate. In its broadest definition, it could include all of the 3 previously discussed categories. It can include refugees. It can include migrants, whether they're there legally or illegally. It can include immigrants. Immigrants, yes, will be an expatriate from another country, even after they immigrate and establish citizenship in a new country. Anyone who lives outside the country where they were born for any amount of time or any purpose, by the broadest definition, would be an expatriate. Now, the term is usually shortened to just expat. And in this form, it takes on a very specific connotation, with implications about economic class and even race. Expatriates and expats are usually viewed as having the following characteristics. They do not face, this is important, they do not face the economic limitations in their own country that migrants would. They could just as well work in their own country. If you ask them, say, yeah, I got a job there, I could have a job if I want it. You know, they are usually European, North American, or Australian, New Zealander. White, European-based. They are often sent abroad by a company in their own country, and they are paid by that company, not by a local employer, unlike migrants who must join the economy of the country where they are working. another cause of liminality and a great challenge. They usually plan to return to their home country, often after a defined period where they may be maintaining homes. Some may have chosen to live abroad because they enjoy the climate and culture, not because they are obligated to work. We have a couple of teachers here on staff who have told me, oh, I'm working here because I'm just curious about it. What would it be like to teach? I've finished my career. I'm going to retire after this. Many are retirees, living off Social Security, pensions, and passive income from stocks. They don't have to work. Some are tax exiles, wealthy individuals who choose to establish residence in offshore tax havens such as the Cayman Islands or Monaco, like the Monte Carlo expat colony, very famous. There have been expat colonies, local groups of very wealthy foreigners living outside their country. They're wealthy though, and they set up a base in a community with others of their kind. The writers that Ernest Hemingway writes about in Sun Also Rises, and I think some of those took a trip to Spain at one point. 5 minutes, I'm almost, yes, I'll get it. Okay, very good. You know, in Hills Like White Elephants, some of those expatriates took a vacation in Spain, right? Citizens of countries that tax overseas income, such as the United States, which taxes all foreign-earned income over $125,000. Did you know that? Sometimes choose to become citizens of other countries, then renounce their U.S. citizenship. Not because they're afraid politically, they just don't like to have to pay taxes on their income because they're so wealthy. Is expat then a racist term or a classist term? Some migrants have noted that fellow migrants from wealthier countries prefer to avoid calling themselves migrants, instead using expat, when in fact they are living in a country on that country's economy with no definite ties to their original country. This is my own observation. For these migrants from economically developed countries, they're migrants, the term may carry a sense of shame, an association with people from poorer countries who are labeled as migrants. These migrants from economically developed countries may fear being associated with illegal or undocumented migrants, even though the accepted definition of migrant does not distinguish between those working under visas and those present in a country without visas. One scholar specializing in migration studies has written extensively on expatriates as part of the migrant population. It is Sophie Cranston from Loughborough University in the UK. In an article called Expatriate as a Good Migrant, Thinking Through Skilled International Migrant Categories in the journal Population, Space and Place in 2017, Sophie Cranston says, the way in which a migrant is distinguished from an expatriate is the question of return. The migrant is expected to stay, while an expatriate is expected to return to their home country. Yet the term expatriate often becomes one that is axiomatically applied to Western migrants living abroad. All Western migrants. Western migrants. We should not see the term expatriate as axiomatic in describing this type of mobility, as we need to pay attention to the political context in which the term is enmeshed. We need to understand how expatriation is not only understood as an identity in relation to the place of stay abroad, but also in comparison to migration as a whole. In Expatriate as a Good Migrant, Cranston examines how British migrants in Singapore draw upon racialized understandings of immigration debates to portray expatriates as being good migrants. Cranston finds that Western migrants in Singapore are defining themselves as expats based on factors such as level of education, rank within their organizations, and salary received, not based on intended period of stay or ties to their home countries. Moreover, those who call themselves expatriates do not see themselves as becoming immigrants to Singapore. They're not aiming to stay, yet they will not call themselves migrants. Thus, I would say, expatriates dwell in the same liminal state as all other groups of people who live outside their countries, though some of them are perhaps a little less liminal. Now I want to conclude with a question for fellow faculty. Where do you place yourself on the spectrum from refugee to expatriate, and why? I'm curious. And how liminal is your life? Thank you for listening.
Excellent. Thank you, John.
Thank
We
you.
have questions.
Oh, I should stay up here, I guess. Out of time. Anybody? Questions, comments? Go ahead, Constantine. Yeah.
Yes, first quick question. Is there an antonym to liminal, like the opposite of liminal, like permanent or?
That's a good question. Yeah, it would probably be.
Because I need that term for my second question.
Okay, that's a good question. Could it be, probably a number of possible ways to label that. It could be
I like illiminal.
illiminal. You're supposed to illiterate, you're illiminal. Perhaps settled or homebound, I don't know. Settled is a good one. Landed, perhaps. People, I think, who never leave their countries, and also people who don't venture far from where they were even born, are probably the least liminal, yeah? And probably know nothing of liminality or his experience.
Right.
The more you get out and the farther you go away from where you were born, the more liminal you become, yeah.
Okay, so settled is a good term. So my question is, where's the threshold between being settled and being liminal? Because, for example, does birth define where you're settled? Because there are some people who were born in the country, but then migrated at a very young age to some other country and established a permanent domicile there.
Right.
So, and they feel at home in those
Exactly.
countries.
I would say if they're not moving around, and they really have been there permanently, and especially if they've obtained citizenship in a country, so that they're no longer in a state of flux where they could possibly have to leave, then they would be not limited. Yeah. Yeah. But on the other hand, keep in mind though that if you're a citizen, let's say you're an immigrant, and I know several who are born in one country, immigrated to another country. Pascal is like this. He was born in France, he became a citizen of the United States, but nevertheless he still became a migrant. He came over here to teach, and now he's sort of, well, he's not really even an expat at the moment, he's just sort of going back and forth between here and the US. So he is actually living quite liminally, I think. Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. More? Go ahead.
There's a question.
The languages can affect the liminal, because I think the different languages context may, for example, if I speak English and I will in an English verbal language system, and I speak Chinese, I will use Chinese system.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, using multiple languages, being in a situation where you have to communicate in multiple languages is liminal, very liminal, and it leads to this liminal identity. It leads to this openness and the constant switching. We call it code switching, where you're going back and forth between languages, and not only languages, but even nonverbal language, gestures and responses. There's another thing about it too. It's an interesting, that's another presentation I could actually do. Performativity in language. I've been known to tell my students, if you want to speak English well, you need to pretend you are an English speaker. Try to put yourself into the identity of an English speaker. Try to sound like an English speaker would sound. And if you do that, on the other hand, it will mess with your identity. It will weaken your identity to some extent. Well, that's the important question. I think a big question that arises here is, number one, is it bad to be liminal? I mean, what if being liminal actually opens you to a lot of possibilities? So if you only want to cling to your Chinese identity without disrupting it or changing it, then you don't want to be learning a foreign language, you don't want to be going overseas. You just want to be Chinese. Liminality, yes. People who are liminal are very open people. Yes, yes. And this is another thing. I mean, there are benefits to liminality. And I wanted to have a section on that, but I had to take it out for time. But there are benefits to liminality, and they're huge. When you're liminal, you are not tied to a given country. You actually see the whole world at once. And this is an important thing. Watch Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's one of the major themes of it. We have Evelyn Wong, the protagonist there, who's struggling in our present universe to maintain her her status and not be, audited and charged with some sort of tax crime by the IRS in the United States. She's struggling. She's being arrested, and but then she suddenly learns that she's actually, in another universe, she's a queen. She's an empress. She holds great power. She's like this goddess who has directed universes. And, so it emerges that someone who's liminal stands outside the restrictions, the full restrictions of where they're from. And they're not necessarily devoted to one particular country or ideal. So there's a great openness to it, which can be scary to some. And Evelyn, too, is very scared by it until she kind of learns to deal with it. And it's very metaphorical. That's not reality, really. It's just a poetic symbolism. But that does kind of express the feeling, the idea that when you're liminal, when you're learning multiple languages, when you're living in many places, the world becomes yours, in a sense. You move more freely and without fear overall. You'll have a lot of inconveniences, but you'll also be freer to some extent, yeah. You'll also be kept from belonging anywhere in particular. They won't let you stay, but you can move again. And so that's the liminality. And yes, language learning is very important. Those who speak multiple languages are also acquiring multiple identities. Multiple identities. They become, when they speak Spanish, they sympathize with the refugees from Guatemala, for example. They also make a lot of friends over the years, Anyway, does that help? What do you think? Do you want to become liminal, or do you want to stay where you are?
I think people's or cultural confidence is very important.
Confidence.
Cultural confidence.
Cultural
Confidence.
confidence.
Because I think despite some people that can't live in their former countries, like refugees, when you keep our cultural confidence, you can have more identity.
That is true too. That is true too. Yeah, let me address that one. She's got some great ideas about this. When you're liminal, when you're moving from country to country, you do try to find some identity from where you're from. We maintain things. I love to eat Western food, American food, European food. I also love to eat all kinds of Asian food too, though. And I listen to jazz and rock, So that's my main source of solace on a Friday night is to listen to jazz and rock, And because it's from where I come from, So, and also in my home, we're only speaking English. So my son is actually very Americanized in that sense, but he's more Filipino than anything. But yeah, so we try to hold on to something of our identity, our original identity. Yeah, something we can take and hold and say, this is my origin. This is where I come from. I should, to some extent, be proud of that. Yeah. Very good. Thank you. Those are deep ideas. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. We'll go back to some definitions at the beginning here.
Sure.
So how much of the idea of liminal would you say is like a subjective understanding? And that like when people say like it feels like a liminal space, or like we're often like hallways can be liminal spaces, but not always, right? Like so it's very much depending on the person, or does it even depend on their subjective feeling for?
I think in the case of something like a hallway, it's pretty solidly liminal in my view.
Well, what if you're a cleaner who works in a hallway? Like,
okay, let's say you're working in a hallway. Yeah, like the security guard.
Or security guard.
In our apartment lobby downstairs.
Yeah, receptionist in a hallway.
Yeah, and he's there for his whole life. That becomes his life's work. Yeah, that's less lim, that's
It
one
really-
condition is less
It
limited.
really depends on the use, right?
Yeah.
Because let's assume that our students get very upset and they organize a protest in the hallways. Then hallways becomes something entirely different, right? Same thing
Yeah.
with streets and plazas. When
Yeah.
people,
Very symbolic places. They can be transformed. Liminal spaces can be transformed temporarily into something
And
much
is that
more.
transformation often like our putting an idea onto the space?
Yes.
So it comes
Yes,
from us.
Yes, it
right?
is. Murals and parks, gardens can make a liminal space seem a little more settled. Yeah. Yeah, good, yeah. Any others? Yeah. I'm really curious about where you stand. Are you an expat or are you a migrant? Do you accept your migrancy or what? Anyway, talk about what do you do?
Yeah, I would consider myself expat.
Okay.
Simply because in where I come from, Germany, it's not that I'm persecuted or that there are economic hardships.
You feel comfortable working in Germany? Do you worry about what your salary would be or receive? Or
Not well. You would have to go into details, but overall, compared to some countries from like developing countries moving to the West, not so much.
typically, they define one of the ways to define migrants is simply that they're looking for better economic opportunities than they could have in their country. Is that your case?
I don't
Are you
think
here for
it's-
us?
No. Right.
Yeah,
I consider myself an expat
expat. Okay.
rather than a migrant. I used to work in the USA, so I could go back any time and get a job teaching. I have all of the certifications and licensing and everything I need to. I mostly just came overseas because I wanted to live abroad and work abroad, essentially.
Yeah, that's when you're young, right? Me too. When I first came to Asia, I just wanted the experience. But over the years, and here's another point about liminality. If I can, I'm sorry to break in a bit. But what the experience you're talking about, when I first came here in 1992, I was 25 years old, had an MA degree. I had no idea whether I'd stay or not, but I knew I needed the experience and to live more broadly than I had lived in Alabama. And so I came over here, and I liked it so much I stayed. And the consequence of it has been, the longer you stay outside your own country, the longer you stay liminal, the harder it is to go back. And that has been, and that is what's kind of left me in my migrant situation. I can't take my wife to the U.S. They won't let me bring my wife because I don't live there. I'm not a resident of the U.S. I have an address there and a bank account and a driver's license from the U.S., but that's not enough for them to let me bring my wife, a Filipina, into the U.S. with me. They won't let me take her. See, that's like this guy talking to Victor there in the airport. You, for all intents and purposes, right now are unacceptable. That's the answer I got from U.S. immigration regarding taking my wife to the U.S. So the longer you stay outside, the harder it will be to go back to your country. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
okay, well, you
Really? Yeah.
anyone else?
I love the topic. I could talk all night about it.
Well, if that's it, thank you everyone for coming today. We will have the next installment of the faculty lecture series in a few weeks, so